So when you're going to be writing lab reports, you're going to be asked to identify experimental variables. There are three types: independent variables, dependent variables, and controlled variables. Let's talk about each one. The first one, the independent variable, is the thing that you change about what you're observing. The dependent variable is what happens because of that change. And the controlled variables are what you keep the same in order to make sure that you have a point of reference to make your comparisons. All right, let's look at an example. Let's say that you want to figure out what a plant needs to grow. You take two plants. You decide that you're going to put one out in the sun and the other you're going to lock it in your cupboard. So what you've changed is the environment of the plant. If we want to be really more specific, what you've done is you've given one plant sunlight and the other you gave them no sunlight. Okay? So the one that we're giving something or sometimes taken away, we call that the experimental group. So the plant in the sun would be our experimental group, and our independent variable would be the amount of sunlight. So the dependent variable, we're looking to see how much the plant will grow. The amount of growth would be our dependent variable. And finally, our controlled variables are those things that are the same for both the experimental group and the control group. The control group is that group that we don't change anything, okay? All right, let me pause right here and make sure that I'm making a distinction between variables and groups, okay? So we have two groups, experimental group and control group. Experimental group is the group that I have changed something about. Control group is the group that I have done nothing to. Independent variable is what I have changed about the experimental group. Okay? Dependent variable is what changes because of what I changed. Okay? And controlled variables are conditions that I keep the same between the experimental group and the control group. So for our plant experiment, that might be something like the type of plant, okay? The length of time that I observe them, the type of soil that I feed them, okay? All of those things that must stay the same in order to make a good comparison are controlled variables. Okay, here's another example. I'm your teacher and I have two classes, academic and pre-allied health. I want to know if my students are going to do better on their tests if I give them their tests on Monday as opposed to our regular day, Friday. So I decide that I'm going to switch it up and give the academic science class their tests on Monday and keep the pre-allied health tests on Friday. Which group is my experimental group and which group is my control group? If you said that the academic science group is my experimental group, then you're correct. I changed the date of the test for that group, and for the pre-allied health group, I left it the same. So, my next question, what is the independent variable in my experiment? If you said the date of the test, then you're correct. What I'm changing is the date of the test. Instead of Friday, I'm now making it Monday. So what is my dependent variable? If you said the scores on the test, then you are correct. I'm watching to see whether, because of my change, my students will do better or worse or no change at all. Okay? What are some conditions that I must keep the same? What are some controlled variables that I must make sure they are in place in order for my experiment to be fair? If you said the difficulty of the test, the length of time of the test, the quality of instruction, all of those things would be controlled variables that I would have to make sure are in place so that when I give the test, one group does not have an advantage over the other. Okay? So, to wrap up, we have 3 types of variables in experiments that we need to identify. The independent variable, which is the thing we change about the experimental group. The dependent variable, the change that happens because of the independent variable. And the controlled variables, those things that we need to keep the same to make sure the experiment is fair. The controlled variable is not the same as the control group. The control group is the opposite of the experimental group. That's the group that we changed nothing about, and it's only there for us to compare our results. Okay? All right, that's it. Remember, practice, practice, practice.